Welcome into the Paul Farrington Show. Paul, joined by Robert Ziggy Ziegler at the University of Virginia. Ziggy, this is why people tune into the show, to see me and you heartbroken, miserable. This was a devastating, soul-crushing, I said at times, 31-29 loss for the Vikings against, the team that we just ranked number one in our power rankings. That's something we have to understand. The Detroit Lions are a very, very good football team. In my opinion, right now they are the front runner to go to the Super Bowl in the NFC. This is a very, very good Lions team with Jared Goff playing. Honestly, this is probably the best football he's ever played in his life right now. There are moments where Jared Goff and forget about the time in LA, the struggles at the end. This version of Jared Goff is MVP caliber. He feels unstoppable. And it's kind of weird to think that about Jared Goff, but with the Detroit offensive line, when they give him time, he can just slice you apart. And at the end of the Viking game here, Minnesota takes the lead 29-28. We're going to cover the entire game. Who knows how long this is going to go. The Vikings take the lead on the fumble, the David Montgomery fumble. And there were two critical stretches, two critical points where the Vikings offense, I think, let them down in this one. One was the 2-point conversion. I understand you're fortunate to get the defensive touchdown, but you need that too, because look how it ended. And then the 3rd and 4 with a chance to keep the ball, you just can't go 3 and out in that situation after you get the second stop on Detroit up 29-28, a 60-yard punt for Detroit, and we go 3 and out. That was just backbreaking. And the Lions got the ball back, and I'm trying this more optimistic Paul personality during this season, but when they got the ball back, needing 35 yards or so to go to get a game-winning field goal opportunity, it did feel like this offense, this is the best offense in football, and how many breaks can the defense get here? So I was just really, it was a great game, and both teams showed a lot of fight. Detroit coming back from the horrible first quarter, the Vikings coming back from just a horrendous defensive performance. Horrible second. So my takeaway is the Vikings just lack the critical plays that championship teams need to make, and the Lions made them in that final, the final 5 minutes of the game there.
Yeah, well, Paul, I remember you texted me on the very first the very first possession of the game of the Lions when they went for that fake punt and it didn't work. You said, I hope that the Lions lose because of this. And I know that people sometimes get upset about Dan Campbell for being too aggressive and all of that, and I'm not here to litigate that. What I am here to say is that Dan Campbell and Jared Goff is a special connection. These guys see the game the same way. They approach the game the same way. They're always on the same page. And you could just see, I think, as the game went on, right? They're down 10-0. They're not doubting a thing. You get towards the end of the game, right? They're willing to put the ball in Jared Goff's hands. It's not just Jahmyr Gibbs. He obviously did a ton. He had an incredible game. But they were willing to let Jared Goff drop back and take some risks. He could pass to Gibbs. He could pass to Amon-Ra, right? When they needed big plays, even though Jared Goff wasn't always there, they were willing to put trust in him. And when you've got a connection like that between a head coach and a quarterback, you've got the weapons, right? You've got Amon-Ra, you've got Gibbs. Montgomery was out for a little bit, but he came back. He almost cost them the game, but he was good enough. You've got that offensive line. There's just so many pieces working right. This Lions team is extremely difficult to beat. And that's why I know you said this is misery hour for us. And I feel a little bit sad, but it's just hard for me to feel too bad about this Vikings team losing by 2. Like every game we beat ourselves. Sam Darnold had some tough plays that were halves or quarters where things just didn't work at all. I'm not trying to take away anything from the Lions. They deserve to win this game. I'm saying it don't feel like it's all doom and gloom for Minnesota because we lost this.
No, yeah. And I think that's a good point you make. The Lions had a huge fumble at the end of the game there. The bad breaks and the self-inflicted wounds probably leaned. And I think it actually wound up being about even. The biggest one was clearly the fumble. The Vikings, their offense has had some trouble a little bit over the past couple weeks. Not exactly moving the ball, but then getting into enemy territory and there's a big flag or they take a sack and they can't convert those drives into touchdowns, which is what they were doing at the start of the season. You saw it today. They really couldn't get in. They didn't get in the end zone after the touchdown to Jefferson to start the half. So that's a spot where Minnesota just needs to be able to to finish out drives and put it in the end zone. You had big plays to Addison. You had a lot of big plays, but then all of a sudden you get to the 30-yard line and someone would jump offsides or something like that. And that was crucial.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers bear that out, right? The Vikings averaged 7.4 yards per play this game. That's an incredible number. It's better than the Lions, right? The Lions averaged 7. Both of these offenses were clicking, but at various times for both of them, they were able to have big plays, but scoring in the NFL is tough. And you can look at the Vikings and say they've got 29, but 6 of those came off of that scoop and score, right? That wasn't really the offense. The offense this game, honestly, I think more than the defense let the Vikings down. The defense, obviously, giving up 21 points in a quarter is unacceptable. But ultimately, when it came down to it, the defense was close to good enough. I think they played well enough to win, given an almost impossible assignment. I think the Vikings offense, you could have hoped for a little bit more in terms of execution. And I mean, Justin Jefferson is incredible. But setting aside his performance, Aaron Jones was solid. You had a couple big plays from Addison and Naylor, but there really wasn't much else in the passing game.
No,
right? Big plays are nice, but you need some consistency. And that's why you see a huge yards per play number. You see great numbers on the aggregate, but you see 4 for 10 on third down. You see 60 penalty yards. You see interception, bunch of turnover on downs, punts, not enough.
Well, I think the play that ultimately wound up being the difference in this game was actually the Brian Branch turnover, the interception that Darnold threw when he missed a pretty wide open Aaron Jones, instead went to Jordan Addison. Brian Branch is unbelievable. He made a lot of big time plays in this game.
He had a big one taken away from him too.
Yep, had a big one taken away. He had the holding penalty forced on Ty Chandler. I thought he was just awesome. If he doesn't make that play, and it was a horrible throw from Sam, but if Branch doesn't make that play, I think that drive ends in points for the Vikings, whether or not it's a field goal or a touchdown. And then Detroit took the ball there, and that was part of that little phase they have. And they have these stretches where the offense is unstoppable. And that this is the worst time to throw an interception when Goff is clicking like that. And Detroit scored a touchdown. And that winds up being the difference to me. Even if you forgot about the fumble, the Vikings have the lead at the end of the game in the fourth quarter there, if you take away that 10-point, 14-point swing. And really, I mean, you said it, Ziggy. This was a really close game. Every single number, if you break it down, it's like total plays 56-52 in Detroit favor, 391 to 383 total yards in favor of Detroit, 247, 244 passing, 144, 139 rushing. Detroit, 8 penalties for each team. The Vikings 59 total yards of penalties. Detroit 49, and that was kind of it. Is Detroit wound up being just a little bit better than the Vikings today, and I agree with you that to sit here, and while it does feel like the sky is falling because it's a 5-0 start, win this, you have a 2-game lead on the 1 seed, really firm control too, because you win the game at home that you need to in a big division game. So it's easy to feel as a Viking fan like, this just absolutely sucks. Now we're a wild card. We have to go to Detroit later in the year. You sit back and look at the situation. You say, all right, that's a really damn good game. We played pretty bad football for a quarter and a half and still had a very good chance to win that football game. On the other side for Detroit, I mean, this is as big a win as you could possibly have. And I do think it puts them in the driver's seat. Now, Detroit has some tough matchups down the stretch here. I know they have San Francisco later. Let's see. Let's take a look at Detroit. They got Tennessee next week, then at Green Bay. That's a huge one. At Houston. Then a little bit of a lighter stretch with the Jaguars, the Colts, the Bears. But then you have, over the course of your final 5 games, Green Bay, Buffalo at home, at Chicago, at San Francisco versus the Vikings. So you got these next few weeks where you should try and get a couple wins here. And then, it's going to be earned if Detroit winds up getting the 1 seed. And no one wants to go into Ford Field. No one wants to go into Minnesota or Green Bay, all these NFC North teams. If you're hosting the playoffs, it's a tough place to win. In Detroit, to go into Minnesota and get a win after being down 10-0, I thought it's a great day to be a Lions fan.
Yeah, and the thing that impresses me about this team is, there have been a lot of teams that have gotten in a hole to Minnesota and then have sort of taken a big jump and haven't quite been able to get it done. I know that's mostly been in the second half when the Vikings have a bigger lead. But the Lions, after that miserable first quarter, they were pretty close to a well-oiled machine. right? They've got their incredible running game behind an incredible offensive line. Jahmyr Gibbs is one of the most explosive running backs. Jared Goff, I mean, 250 total passing yards, even taking out the sacks, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, 3 incompletions. If you have him drop back, there is a very good chance that ball is getting caught by someone and you're gaining some yards. They've got a defense that without Aiden Hutchinson, right? We were talking all this week. Everyone was saying that this defense wouldn't be able to get it done without Aiden Hutchinson. A bunch of guys step up, right? You have 4 different players get sacks, including a sack to end the game. I'm not saying everything was perfect for them, but the Lions, after taking a gut punch, said, we'll be okay. We're just going to play the game our way. You know, you see a lot of teams get desperate in those situations, right? They stop running. They start panic throwing the ball. The Lions have a game plan. They have an identity. They're not afraid to stick to it. And when they're playing football that way, they are tough to beat.
I mean, it comes down to, and this is so much easier said than done, but when Detroit gets rolling like that and they're winning up front, the ground game is so good. You and Jack make fun of me for saying how much I like Jahmyr Gibbs, but 15 carries, 116 yards and 2 touchdowns, 45-yarder, the longest of his career, I believe it was. When they get rolling on the ground, and then Goff, as we said so many times, is so deadly when he has time. If you can't win at the line of scrimmage, especially when the Vikings are sending blitzes, you get picked apart. I mean, you can't beat Detroit. Like, I flat out just say it. You can't beat Detroit if you can't win up front, especially when you're sending extra people. And there was that stretch after the first 2 drives where the Vikings were figured out. And I don't know what Ben Johnson saw, what Jared Goff saw, but you could see at the line of scrimmage, Goff was just, it was masterful watching that for a little bit, where he just knew exactly where he was going to go. And Detroit was picking everything up. And in that situation, like the 49ers, the Packers, the Vikings, no one's beating Detroit. No one's stopping them if they get in that groove. And you saw it at the end of the game when the Vikings started to mount the comeback. Well, what changed? Obviously, there's a big fumble, but on that one drive when they finally stopped the Lions, they got Goff. They got there. You know, Jonathan Grenard got to him. That's the difference. And I really wish that on the fumble, the strip sack there at the end, if we pick that up, that's the one I'm looking at like, oh, yeah, on the Grenard strip sack there, if it doesn't bounce up into Goff's hands, the Vikings pick it up. Now Detroit needs a touchdown. There were this game came down to so many tiny details on both sides. Tiny details in the form of, huge plays. But it was a fun one to watch. I mean, it was just a great game. And unfortunately, the Vikings don't come out on the right side of it. But I feel very comfortable saying that the Lions showed to me why they are rightfully so now considered the favorite to win the NFC. And the Vikings showed to me that on any given day, they can beat any given team. If Detroit came in here and ran away with it when it was 21-10, that's a concerning sign. Sam Darnold has shown multiple times that he can take the Vikings on big drives, even though we weren't able to get that biggest one today.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be any authentic power ranking. I know you said you're not moving the Chiefs off of 1 until they lose. I don't care if they win today or not. I think the Lions have proven themselves at this point with how they've played. I mean, again, you look at their stretch over the last 3 weeks, right? They blow out Seattle. They go to Dallas and humiliate them. So bad that Jerry Jones is calling radio stations saying he's going to fire people. Yeah. They go to Minnesota, right? A hot team coming off a bye, right? Minnesota had all the time in the world to prepare for this. Flores did his best. It wasn't enough. It's hard for me to not look at this Lions team and say that right now they're the best in the NFL. And the only reason I don't think they're the Super Bowl favorite is because they've got to go through the NFC North and a tougher NFC than AFC.
Yeah, I'm leaving the Chiefs up there. The Chiefs defense is, for the struggles that Mahomes has had at points this season, the offense has had some issues. The Kansas City defense is great. And they've got some big wins over big teams. So to me, the power rankings, what do we have? We had Detroit, Baltimore, Houston, who will be moving down, the Vikings and Kansas City in the top 5. I don't think the Vikings come out of the top 5. I don't like Detroit. Obviously, is going to stay in a top 5 position here. The Packers might even move up into that top 5. We might be looking at 3 teams in the top 5 in the NFC North, and I don't think that that's overranking anybody. I think it's just a really good division. One more quick question for you, Ziggy, before we wrap this up here. So we kind of touched all along. Detroit Stars showed out today. Goff was amazing. Gibbs, Amon-Ra, Branch, everyone who needed to show up showed up. On the Vikings side, a lot of their stars showed up as well. Jefferson was unstoppable. And he draws so many penalties. You need to triple team him, basically. It's amazing how much coverage he demands. But one thing I started thinking about during this game is the question of Sam Darnold, and this will be pushed for later in the year, an extensive conversation. But Sam Darnold as a long-term option for Minnesota, there are times when you're watching him and you say, like, he's really close to figuring this out. Like, he looks good. He's moving well. I mean, he had a pass to Naylor, perfect pass, to Addison. Like, he fits really well. Kind of how Goff fits in with Detroit. It seems like we might be in one of the earlier stages of Sam Darnold starting to really fit in with O'Connell and the Vikings. How comfortable are you? I've seen a couple people say right now, give him a huge contract, like extend him, give him $45-50 million a year, and let's lock this guy down. I'm still hesitant to go there. Where do you stand on that?
I will just the Vikings simply will not do that. The way this Vikings team is built, the way they've approached things over the past few years, they have not built a team around trying to scrounge around pieces for a really expensive quarterback. They've built it around a rookie quarterback. I think somebody's going to offer Darnold a solid contract this offseason, especially if he plays like this. I think he's going to shatter the Baker Mayfield number. So I think some team is going to be willing to offer him a ton of money. I don't think it's going to be Minnesota because there's a plan in place with the contracts they've signed guys to, like Grenard, like Justin Jefferson. They've built this team around having a lot of expensive players surrounding a rookie quarterback. Sam Darnold at $50 million a year, even if he continues to play well, I think you are in real danger of ending up in a situation like the Jaguars are in. Maybe you'll be better than the Jaguars, right? But if you pay Sam Darnold that amount of money and he doesn't single-handedly, week in, week out, win you games, it's not worth it.
Yeah,
you have an alternative.
I disagree with the Darnold getting $50 million a year. And I think it's because of the reason you said.
I'm not sure he's going to get that much, but
even 45.
45.
I mean, I could see a 2-year $70, 2-year $80 million deal. And then you get the chance to, he'll only be 29 or 30 by the time he rolls around for the big extension. Like, Sam Darnold's younger than Joe Burrow. He's younger than Lamar Jackson. People forget that because he's a journeyman. But I just can't see a 2-year $70 million or 2-year $80. I'm sorry, a 2-year $100 million, something like that, coming down the pipe. Definitely not from the Vikings. I'll tell you
why it might be coming down the pipe. There are a lot of teams in the NFL that need quarterbacks. And you look at the guys coming out of college this year, right? Like, is Carson Beck going to play better than Sam Darnold? Is Jalen Milroe going to play better than Sam Darnold? Is Shedeur Sanders going to play better than Sam Darnold?
Yeah, but you look around the league and you say, do we want to end up like where the Jaguars are now, where the Giants are now, where the Browns are now? There's this laundry list of growing where the Dolphins are. There's this laundry list growing of teams that give massive contracts to
your job is in danger. You bring in Darnold.
Go ahead.
No, if your job's in danger, you bring in Darnold on some big deal. If he wins you a bunch of games, your job's saved. If he doesn't win you a bunch of games, you weren't going to win anyway. You get fired, and it's someone else's problem. You see contracts like this in the NFL all the time.
Yeah, I just don't think you see the $50 million club's a massive number. I mean, that's a massive contract. The guys who are in that club, half of them don't even deserve to be in it, like we said. My bet is on 35 to 40. I think that's where you see Darnold. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Vikings did it, actually, at the end of the year. This will not be an in-season thing. There's too many pieces moving around. There's too little of a sample size to just hand a contract. But I thought Sam played really well today. He had the pick was backbreaking, and the two missed throws at the end of the game were crushers. Ultimately, they lost the game, but I don't think it's time for.
Yeah, but I mean, as easy as it is to point at, as easy as it is to point at Sam Darnold for that, I think you also have to consider how many plays were there for the Vikings where nobody was open, right? The play calling or scheming just didn't work, and Darnold had to run for it. I mean, you saw, especially later in the game, play after play that looked like that. Mm-hmm. Huge credit to the Lions defense for getting that done, but. I mean, that's the reason Darnold wasn't able to do it there. But also, like, the offense around him wasn't getting it done either.
I thought the
So,
Lions
I don't know.
defense without Hutchinson looked the front seven, and particularly getting pressure on Darnold. They wound up having 4 sacks on the day. It felt to me like Sam did a good job moving in the pocket. I didn't feel that he was under duress very often, especially when he stepped up. A lot of times he had open lanes to run or throw. So I thought you could easily feel the Aiden Hutchinson effect. Detroit did a good job. I still think that look, yeah, they stepped up. A lot of guys stepped up, but people are going to need to step up even more to alleviate the loss of Aiden Hutchinson, where, it was good today. And I don't even know if I want to say good. It was acceptable today. They didn't have really much pressure
to beat the Minnesota Vikings at home.
Yes,
coming off
it was good enough at the end. At the end of the game, it stepped up a few times. Man, Brian Branch is fun to watch. They have a few linebackers too. Like they're a fun team, Detroit. I do wonder if Dan Campbell's coaching decisions at some point will have another costly effect, the way I felt it did in San Francisco. But that's who they are. And they're one of the most fun teams in the league to watch right now. So
yes, what the costly effects you get, you also get Dan Campbell willing to be able to go back there, put the ball in Jared Goff's hands when a lot of coaches are happy just running off the clock and get it done and win the game.
Yeah.
So I don't know. The Lions, I think both of these teams, obviously you want to win. So the Vikings can't be thrilled with their performance. But I think both of these teams should be reasonably happy, and the Lions should be thrilled. Huge win in Minnesota.
Yep, huge win. Sucks for us straight up. It was a crusher. I let out a flurry of expletives at the end of the game, and then was like, all right, relax. So here we are. Here we are now, 5-1, tied with Detroit. Detroit's in first, which sucks at 5-1, kind of crazy, but it's going to be a battle. It's going to be a lot of fun, and the Vikings have a quick turnaround. I believe we're in LA Thursday night, so that'll be fun too. All right, we'll wrap this one up. We'll have a couple more reactions today. We're going to have the Packers and Texans as well. That's coming out. If you want to watch that, get some more of the NFC North news, and then maybe we'll be back with the full reaction tonight. Not sure what the schedule is going to be. We kind of had guys moving around today, so we'll figure it out. But Ziggy, thanks for hopping on this one. Vikings lose 31-29 to the Lions. Big win for Detroit. Crushing loss for Minnesota. We'll see you later today.